Hello, this is Nancy Haynes. In this presentation, I will demonstrate some of the design principles of multimedia learning that we have been studying in our Education 2740 class. After viewing this presentation, the learner will be able to describe some of the design principles of multimedia learning and be able to create effective presentations utilizing the design principles. There are several design principles. The ones that I will focus on for this presentation are the principles of multimedia, contiguity, modality, and redundancy. We'll save the principles of coherence, personalization, segmenting, and pre-training for another lesson. Probably the easiest way to explain the design principles is by example. First, I will demonstrate how not to apply the principle, and then I'll demonstrate a better way to apply the principle. The multimedia principle recommends using words and graphics rather than words alone. Well, the fact that this slide consists only of words is a violation of the multimedia principle. And then there's the issue of having too many words on the slide. Using keywords or phrases that are bulleted is preferred over using complete sentences. Okay, let's try it again. The multimedia principle recommends using words and graphics rather than words alone. Humans use two channels to process knowledge, auditory and visual. Each channel has a limited capacity. Meaningful learning occurs when both channels are engaged. However, we can actively process only a few pieces of information in each channel at one time. The brain has a cognitive load, or a maximum capacity of information that it can comprehend. Therefore, using fewer words and pictures will make it easier for the learner to process and retain information. The second principle is the contiguity principle. This principle recommends placing printed words near the corresponding graphics. So what's wrong with this slide? Well, there are many ways that the contiguity principle can be violated. This is one example where the list that is a part of the graphic is started on one screen, and then the list continues on another screen. Simply stated, the contiguity principle means that when designing e-learning materials, instructors should not make the learner search for the information. Present the information contiguously rather than separately. The third principle is the modality principle. This principle recommends presenting words as audio narration rather than on-screen text. Okay, let's critique this slide. Once again, a complete sentence has been used instead of keywords that are bulleted, and every word that is narrated is also on the screen. The modality principle also affects cognitive load and working memory. The principle says to present words as narrated speech rather than on-screen text. If the learner is trying to read the written words, the images will not be processed due to too much information to the brain's visual processing sensors. The fourth principle is the redundancy principle. Redundancy refers to learning inefficiencies that result when we provide learners with too much information. The redundancy principle says not to add redundant on-screen text to narrated graphics. Research shows that learners might pay too much attention to the printed words and less attention to the accompanying graphics. This slide has a call-out cloud that has the wording that the narrator intends to read. Then down in the left-hand corner there is a "Did you know" box. There's a lot of processing that has to go on with this slide that can easily overload the learner's visual channel. My eyes were drawn to all the text boxes to read, and I hardly noticed that the person in the graphic is probably Barb sitting in front of her business. When possible, favor audio alone over printed text to maximize learning, like in this slide. The basic reason that a hot air balloon rises is that the air inside the balloon is warmer than the air outside the balloon. This slide has no printed text to overload the learner's visual channel. Summarizing the design principles. Multimedia is combining words and graphics rather than using words alone. Contiguity is aligning words with their corresponding graphics. Modality is presenting words as narration rather than printed on-screen text. And redundancy is explaining visuals with words in audio or text, but not both. With all the research presented in our textbook, E-Learning and the Science of Instruction, it is evident that when these principles are applied to e-learning presentations, much deeper learning takes place. Try these principles in your next e-learning lesson, and remember, less is more. Less words and less pictures mean more learning. Thank you for listening. Here are the attributions of the photos and graphics that were used in this particular presentation. The majority of the information I presented here came from our textbook, E-Learning and the Science of Instruction.